Okay, so we are on Daf Ayin Hey Amid Beis. Today's Daf is Ayin Vav, and we're going to do Ayin Hey Amid Beis 75b at the two dots. The Mishnah had said that if there are two people that live together in a courtyard, two courtyards, one inside the other, that they would require an Eruv, perhaps together with each other or one and the other. However, if it's just one person living in the inner courtyard and one person in the outer courtyard, then it is sufficient to because each courtyard is an individual alone. So that would not require an Eruv between them. The Gemara is going to tell us in this case, however, if there are three total, where there are two people either in the inner courtyard or two people in the outer courtyard, so that's going to be invalid. So the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Yosef, Tani Rebbe, that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi said that if there are two people living in a total of three people in the two courtyards, meaning one person in one of the courtyards and two in the other, that invalidates it and they cannot carry Asurin. Amalar Rav Beva, so Rav Beva said, look, don't listen to him. Rav Yosef had gotten ill and had forgotten a lot of his learning and would sometimes misquote or forget some of the teaching. So he said, do not listen to it. So even though the halacha it is correct, however, the quote is incorrect. Ana Amritani Ali, because I was the one that told it to him, not Rabbi, who was way earlier. And I said it to him not in the name of the compiler of the Mishnah Rebbe, but rather in the name of Rabbi Adavar Hava, rather Hoyle, and the reason for why we say that it's going to be invalid. Because I say that there are majority, meaning there are more than two people living, because there are two people in the inner courtyard, and they must make an Eruv together and didn't. So now, and they have a right of way through the outer courtyard. So now it counts as if there are multiple people living in the outer courtyard that did not make an Eruv, and it's going to invalidate. Amar Rav Yosef says, now I remember. Marid Avram, by the master of Avram, by God, that Rabim berebi echlefli. Rabim, meaning that there are many people living there. I remembered hearing that, and I confused it, thinking that Rebbe is the one that authored this statement, but I was mistaken. I just got confused. However, Shmuel disagrees with this halacha. Shmuel Amar the Odom Muteras Hachi Yeshnaim Epnimis Vecha Bechitzon. It's only going to be prohibited if there are two in the inner courtyard and one in the outer courtyard. But if it was the other way around, two in the outer courtyard and one in the inner, that's not going to be prohibited because the outer courtyard can still carry. Amar Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar said, V'nachri, and if you have a non-Jew living in the inner courtyard, and there are two Jews living in the outer courtyard, the fact that the non-Jew can walk through it invalidates their Eruv until they lease his space from him. That a non-Jew is going to be like there are multiple people there. So Gemara says, why? What's the basis of this? You're basing this on the fact that some people are going to mistakenly think that you didn't lease the space from it. Why do you say that if a Jew is living there, it will not invalidate the outer courtyard? Because somebody who knows that he lives on the inner courtyard by himself, and since he's allowed to carry in his own space, it does not prohibit the fact that he can walk through does not prohibit the outer courtyard. And one who doesn't know this, he'll think, all right, they made an Eruv together and it's going to be fine, and they're allowed to make an Eruv together. Nachri Nami, by the non-Jew, we can say similarly. Amrin the Yada, the one who knows that he lives in the inner courtyard alone, that's going to be valid. The Lo Yada, and the one who does not know, Savar Agiri Oger, he's going to say, you know what, he probably leased it from him, which is the right way to do it. So Gemara says, Stam Nachri, Isa the Oigir Mifapai. If he had leased it, people would know about it. And since nobody knows about it, we're going to say that we can assume correctly he did not lease the space. And that's why you cannot carry until you actually lease it. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. So Shmuel said another halacha, and here we're going to get into a concept. Just as we have an inner courtyard and an outer courtyard, we're going to get into a concept of an inner house and an outer house, where two houses or multiple houses are connected to each other. And the question is, when the houses are connected to each other, do they count as a single? Can you count them as foyers to the last house? So essentially, you have this long home, of which each room in order to get to it, you have to pass through one room into the other. So today we would make a hallway and each room be separate, but they didn't do that. And you would have to walk through to get to the innermost chamber, which could be 10 deep. You would have to walk through room A, B, C, D, all the way to get to the innermost chamber. So essentially, each one of these rooms, all the way to the last room, are an antechamber, an entryway, a foyer to the room in front of it. So each one of them don't have to make an eruv because they're not going to be an independent space. They're all servicing the room in front of it. Only the last room is its own space. Therefore, he says that even though the outermost one is open to the courtyard, and each one can go in and can walk through there, they're all going to be counted as an entryway, a foyer, and the only one that would need an eruv is the innermost. And since it's a single entity, it won't prohibit it. So only the innermost has to give a bread if any other courtyard wants to join with this courtyard, and no one else has to give a bread. However, Rabbi Yochanan is going to say that no, the last two count that way because it doesn't count as an antechamber, as a foyer, unless there are two rooms in front of it. So let's see this Gemara. Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel, Yud batim zelef and 10 rooms or houses, one inside the other. The only the innermost one has to give its eruv, and that's sufficient because the rest of them count as a base shar, as an entryway. However, Rabbi Yochanan, even the outer one has to give an eruv. So the Gemara says, what are you talking about? The outer one. The outer one, base sharu, that's for sure just an entryway. The outermost room that opens to the courtyard is an entryway into the house. So the Gemara says, chitzon shel panim. You know what it means is the second to last one, the outer one to the innermost chamber. That's the one that's going to count as an inner, as the not as a doorway, because you can't have one room, an entryway to a single room. Rather, you need an entryway to two rooms. So only the third one from the end can count as a Beishar, an entryway. What's the basis of the room of this disagreement? Shmuel says that even an entryway of a single entity would count as an entryway. And one says no, it doesn't count as a Beishar, an entryway, until such time that there are two rooms in there. He gives another scenario in a similar idea. There are two courtyards, courtyard A and courtyard B. And there are three homes between that are attached. There's a triplex, okay, between the two courtyards. There's an entryway to the easternmost in the eastern courtyard, and there's an entryway from the westernmost house in the western courtyard, and the middle house has no entryway to either courtyard, only through the room, it has an entryway into each of the side houses, and from there it can get in. So that middle house can now house the eruv. And if courtyard A and courtyard B, which are not connected, want to join in an Eruv, what they can do is courtyard A is going to give its Eruv through the easternmost house into the center house and put its Eruv meal into there. And courtyard B is going to take its collected Eruv from all of its inhabitants in through the westernmost house into the center house. And this way, each one of the easternmost and centermost and the westernmost house are going to be antechambers, are going to be entryways for the middle house. They're just going to act as foyers, even though somebody lives there, and it really is an independent home. But nevertheless, in regards to this Eruv, it's going to act as an entryway, and therefore each one can put the Eruv into the center house, and it'll count as a joint Eruv for the two courtyards, and none of the houses have to join. The two side houses don't have to join in the Eruv because they're each just an entryway. And the middle house is housing the Eruv, so it doesn't have to join. There are two courtyards, and between them there are three houses, and they are attached. So each one can come through the one house to the center, and put his Eruv into the center. And this courtyard can come through this house, and put its Eruv into the middle. And now we're on 76a, Ayin Vav Amud Aleph. This one will become an antechamber, a foyer to the middle house. And the other, same on the other side, it'll become a foyer, an entryway to the center house. And Emtsoyi in the middle house is the one that the Eruv is sitting in. So therefore it doesn't have to join in the meal. Now, Rachva wanted to see and make sure that everybody understood the reasoning of this courtyard. So he gave a scenario where there's no middle house. There's only two houses, and the question is if each one of those would count as an antechamber to the other one. And of course it doesn't, because you can't be a house for courtyard A, and for courtyard B, you're the entryway to a different room. You are either an entryway or you're a house. So Badik Rachva challenged the students to see whether they understood the reasoning. You have two courtyards, A and B, and Ubeis Batim, and you have two houses in between them. So the courtyard A would walk through this house and put its Eruv in the westernmost house. And the westernmost courtyard is going to come through the west house and put its Eruv in the easternmost house, which the eastern courtyard had just used as an entryway, and they're using it as the house. Does that acquire the Eruv or not? Do we say that this counts as, in regards to courtyard A, this is going to be a house? However, in regards to courtyard B, it's going to be just an entryway. And the same the other way around. So they said to him, no. Both will not acquire the Eruv on account of which way you're going to go with this. If you count this as an entryway on account for the other house, it's not a valid Eruv if you put your Eruv in a porch, a gazebo, or in an entryway. It has to be in the house itself. And if you put it as a house, he's carrying through a house that he didn't put an Eruv into. So therefore, it cannot count as an Eruv because you're using it on both ends, and the halacha is that you can't put an Eruv into an alleyway, into an entryway, a gazebo, or a porch. It has to be in the house itself, and this is not, and you haven't put it into there. So it's not going to be valid. So Yamar says, well, how is this different than a question we had in regards to a statement from Rava? Rava said, if somebody had sent out, and we're going to give you Tosfos interpretation on this Gemara. So if somebody sent out two people and said, please go and make an Eruv with our neighboring courtyards. One of them made an Eruv on Friday when you're supposed to. They collected the breads and put it there prior to the onset of Shabbos, which is the way it's supposed to be done. However, we know that from sunset until the stars come out is twilight. It's in between. It's not Friday anymore, but it's not yet completely Shabbos. And so there are some halachic leniencies that can apply there. And what happened is that even though he collected the breads and put it into the neighboring courtyard, it got eaten before the stars came out. So it wasn't around anymore when Shabbos proper arrived. Nevertheless, it's going to be a valid Eruv, since Eruv is a rabbinic enactment, and so we can be lenient. And so since it is already post-sunset, it's going to be a valid Eruv. Furthermore, the next fellow who he had asked, the second person he had asked to place an Eruv on his behalf, he said, did it the other way around. He forgot to do it on Friday and went ahead and collected the bread and put it into the other courtyard when it was post-sunset. It was already in twilight. And so it's already a question of whether it's Shabbos already, and then it's no longer a valid Eruv. Nevertheless, since it was there during twilight and into the nighttime, and it only got consumed on Shabbos itself, therefore it's going to be a valid Eruv on both ends. Because a matter of doubt, in a rabbinic matter, you can be lenient. So too over here. Each one of these houses, let's try and make it into a matter of doubt. And you can, even though they're contradictory, over there also they're contradictory, and yet you say that it's valid, so too here. The Gemara says, the Amar Rabba said, Amar l'shnayim, he said to two people, Tseva arev aleinu eruv, go and make an eruv with our neighbors. So now one of them, so one of them went and he made an eruv while it was still Friday, but one only did it once it was already twilight. But the one who made the Eruv on Friday before the stars came out, he already got consumed. And the one that made the Eruv after after sunset, his Eruv was valid and was around until stars came out. Nevertheless, even though these are contradictory ideas, they both are a valid Eruv. So to over here, let's do that. So Gemara says, how can you compare the two? Awesome. Over there, Safik Yamama, Safik Leilio. The twilight is a doubt. Is it still Friday or is it already Shabbos? People don't know the difference. People don't know when that moment of transition is, and therefore they recognize, oh, this is a doubt, and maybe it's already Shabbos, and this is a doubt, and maybe it's already Shabbos. These houses, they're either entryways or they're actual houses. And if it's so for this, it's so for this one as well. You can't have it act for one group as a house and one group as a Beishar. That would be contradictory and it can't work. With this, we complete the sixth chapter, the sixth parak of Eruvin. We shall come back to you, parak Adar, Bez Hashem Yisrael. We begin a new conversation. We saw the two courtyards that have independent entryways to the street can make their own Eruv, and sometimes they can make a joint Eruv if they'd like. What do they need as far as separation or not in order to be counted as one and be allowed to make a joint Eruv? So the Gemara is going to tell us they either need a doorway between one and the other, so that's going to count as an entryway, and they're connected, and they can make an Eruv that way. And in the next Mishnah, see that you doesn't even need a doorway. As long as there's an opening, a gap of less than 10 amos in the fence, they can make an Eruv with one and the other. In this Mishnah, it's going to say if you have a window between the two, that's also going to be valid. However, the window minimum size has to be 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim, and at least the bottom part of the window would have to be within the 10 tefachim from the ground. So, so the Mishnah says, you have a window between two courtyards. Dalet al dalet. This window is 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim. Let's say 12 inches by 12 inches. B'tach asara, and it's within 30 inches from the ground, approximately. Okay. Ma'arvin shnayim. So now they can, if they choose, they can make separate eruvs for each courtyard. And if they want, they can join and make a joint Eruv because they have a window that's large enough that they can pass things through and a person can put their head through and lean in, and so it's going to count. Pachas midalid al dalid, but if the window is less than 4 by 4, or it's above 10 tefachim, it's not going to be a valid Eruv. And then the halacha is it's going to be ma'arvin shnayim. They can only make an Eruv as separate Eruvin, but they cannot but they cannot make an Eruv of they cannot make an Eruv as one. So these are various forms of not 4 by 4, even if the area itself may be the same area, but they will not count as a valid Eruv, and they each can only make an Eruv in their own courtyard. They cannot join the two courtyards. So now what's the basis of this? So the Gemara at first thought that the basis is going to be, if you remember at the beginning of the Masechta, we had a discussion on the concept of lavud. Lavud is a concept where if something is less than 3 tefachim apart, the gap is less than 3 tefachim, it's not going to count as as a gap, or rather it's going to count as solid wall. Think of like chain link fence. It's 99% of the fence is airspace, but it counts as a solid wall halachically because the gaps are less than 3 tefachim, which is about let's say 10 inches. So since those gaps are less than 10 inches, less than 3 tefachim, they will count as a solid wall. However, the opinion of Rabbi Shimon Gamliel is at the beginning of Masechta that you actually can have a gap of up to 4 tefachim. And the Gemara thought over here that's the reason why this window must be 4 tefachim wide, because otherwise it's considered as if it's a solid wall. Lema Tanan Stomach Rabbi Shimon Gamliel the Amar Kol Pachas Midalid Kulavadami, who says that 4 tefachim counts as lavid. Gemara says no. Afilo Temek Rabbanan. It could even be according to the Rabbanan Atkan Lepligi Rabbanan later Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, because they only disagree in regards to lavud only if you want to know whether it's a solid wall or not. But in regards to an entryway, an opening to go between two courtyards to count that they join together, that only if you have 4 tefachim does it count, and if not, it's simply not going to be a valid connection. And even if you have a connection, but if it's above 10 tefachim, that's not a valid connection. A window above 10 tefachim, or if you have just holes in the wall or anything like that, you cannot pass things from one to the other because it does not count as a valid connection. Pachas midalit. We said it would have to be less than 4 or above 10 tefachim to be invalid. So Gemara says, you just said that the Mishnah seems superfluous and repetitive. Pshita. Since you already said that it has to be 4 by 4 within 10 tefachim of the ground, so why do you have to tell me if it's above 10 tefachim or if it is smaller than 4 by 4, it's not valid? That's the inverse of what you just told me, that it has to be within 10 tefachim of the ground and 4 by 4. So Gemara says, here's what it's teaching me. Time in the kula l'malamiyud. They're only going to be invalid if the entire window is above 10 tefachim. However, but if some of it is within 10 tefachim of the ground, ma'arvin, that's going to count, shnayim, and therefore they can make an eruv separately if they want, but if they want, they can make a joint eruv. Even if you got a millimeter of that 4 tefachim within the 10 tefachim from the ground, it's enough. Tanina law the Tarabanan, and that means our Mishnah concurs with a brisa which is more explicit about it. Kula l'malamiyud miksasa b'teichasara, kula b'teichasara miksasa l'malamiyasara ma'arvin. If the entire window is above 10 tefachim, besides for a little bit that's within, or the entire window is within 10 tefachim, besides for a little bit that it's above, ma'arvin shnayim imratzim ma'arvin echad. If they want, they can be an eruv as separately. If they want, they can join together. Now the Gemara says, why do you have to tell me? If you tell me a tiny bit is within 10 tefachim, it's good. Why do you have to tell me if most or almost all is in, it's good? Do you have to tell you that? That seems obvious. The Gemara says you're right. It tells us this, and I don't have to tell you that if it's almost all in within 10 tefachim, it's going to be valid, because that seems obvious. Now Rabbi Yochanan is going to tell us, okay, so we said it has to be 4 by 4. What about if the window between the two is a circle? It's not a square, so it's not 4 by 4. What does that circle have to be? If you have a circular window, the circumference would have to be 24 tefachim to be valid. And 2 and a little bit of that circle would have to be within the 10 tefachim. So this is, we're going to go with Tos's explanation because this is easier. Tos's explanation is easier. And essentially, Tos's explanation is this. If you have 24 circumference, so we're going to divide that by 3, which gives me that the vertical line is going to be 8, right? Not my radius, my circumference, the double radius. I'm blanking. Gary?
Diameter.
My diameter.
Unmuting.
Sorry?
I was having trouble unmuting.
No problem. My diameter, which is a vertical line in as well, is going to be 8, right? Roughly.
Yes.
The Gemara is going to go 3 to 1 as pi. So it's 8. So in order for me to get a square of 4 in the center of this circle, I'm going to have 2 tefachim at the top for the arch of the circle, and 2 at the bottom for that circle bend, and that takes away 4 tefachim, 2 at the top, 2 at the bottom, which gives me the center space of 4 tefachim. So therefore, I need the bottom 2 tefachim of this circle to be within the 10 tefachim, and this way my square of 4 in this circle is going to be within the 10 tefachim of the ground.
Clever.
That's Tosas's calculation. Rashi has a different calculation, much more difficult. We're going to go with Tosas because that's a simpler calculation for now. So the Gemara says, this is all nice and dandy, but it simply doesn't work in the math, because if what you need is 4 by 4, and assuming the diameter is 4, so then your circumference is only going to be 12. So the Gemara says, Shnaim amashu, and 2 and a bit are going to have to be within the 10 tefachim. She'im yer ba'enu, because if this way, if you make a square in there, nimtza mashu b'toich yud, this way, a little bit of your window of the 4 wide is going to be within the 10 tefachim. So Gemara says, mechti. Let's analyze this. Kol sheyesh be'kefer shlosha tefachim, anything that has a diameter of 1 tefach, it's going to have a circumference of 3. Anything that has a circumference of 3, yesh baruch of tefach, it'll have 1 tefach wide. Well, then, so then 12 would be sufficient, and you told me you need a 24 circumference. How did you get there? So now we turn to 76b, Ayin Vav Amud Beis. So the Gemara says, Hani Mili, that's true be'igula. Aval be'ribua be'inan tfei. That's true in a circle, but if you need a square within that circle, you're going to need more than just that. In other words, if your diameter was in the center, so you're right, my center line is is 1 tefach. So all I need is 3 tefachim circumference. If my center line is 4, so all I need is 12. However, we don't need a center line of 4. We need a square within there. So my 4 tefachim line is pretty low down in that circle. And so therefore you need more. So Gemara says, okay, so let's analyze this. Mechti, kama meruba yeser ala agel. How much is a square more than a circle? Well, it's easy to work this out. If my square is, let's say, 1 tefach, so I got a tefach by a tefach by a tefach by a tefach. If I took the line, the outer line, what is I got 4 tefachim. And if I have a circle of where the diameter is 1 tefach, so then that's 3. That tells me that square to circle is 4 to 3. It's a quarter more. Ravia. So therefore, even in this case where you're trying to make a circle out of the square, that would still only be 1/4 more. So instead of 12, you're up to 16. You're not much more than that. B'shitzer sagi, it should be enough with 16. So Gemara says, you're right. That's true if you're trying to make a square on the outside of the circle, right? If you're trying to make a square outside of the circle, so your diameter is 1 tefach, and which gives you a 3 circumference. And if you're and that same tefach wide is your square, you're going to get 4 tefachim. However, that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to put the circle inside of the square. Sorry, the square inside the circle. We're trying to put the square inside the circle. Now your circle has to be much bigger than that because you have to fill in the corners of the circle. That's if you're trying to put a circle inside a square. But we're trying to do the opposite. We're trying to put a square of 4x4 inside the circle. You need more. So Gemara says, okay. My time, what's the reason? Because of the corners that are wider than the circle itself. So Gemara says, okay, still, what is my hypotenuse? What is my, if I'm trying to see, what is my square? My square is 4 tefachim. So what is that 45-degree angle running from one corner to the other? That's going to be for every amma, for every one measure, you have 1 2/5 of a measure. Mechti, kol amsa beribua, every square amma, amsa v'trechum shebalachsona. It's a hypotenuse. It's 45-degree angle is going to be 1 2/5. Okay, so let's calculate this. You said you need 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim. So if each one gives me 1 2/5, so times 4, that's going to give me 8/5. So that means that I'm actually 5 3/5 by 5 3/5. So that means my diameter now that I'm looking at is actually 5 3/5 times 3. That's 15 for the 5. And 9/5, so that's another 1 4/5, or as the Gemara is going to call it, 17 minus a fifth. How did you get to 24? It's still not a 24. Shivser nechichum shasagi. That would be 17 minus a fifth. Why do you how did you get to 24? You're still not there. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yochanan Amar Kidaina de Kesari. Rabbi Yochanan follows the opinion of the judges of Kesar, who say that every circle that's inside a square, that is going to equal, it's going to be double. A circle inside a square, that's going to be 1/4 more. As we saw before, that if the circumference is 3, so you're going to have you're going to have 4 tefachim around the square. However, when you're trying to get the circumference around the square, you're going to get 24 circumference around the square of 4 by 4 because it's half. And so if it equals half, it's half. Rashi struggles over here to say what is that count, and essentially said that they made a mistake. And Tosafos says if they made a mistake, that would be that the halacha is not correct. So Tosafos says it means the area is half. Tosafos has another calculation. Either way, it seems like this calculation for the rabbis of Caesarea was not the correct calculation, and that you really pi that would give you a square of 4 by 4, which really is 5 and which really is 5 3/5 for your diameter. 5 3/5 by pi is still under 20. So that's our Motzei Shabbos math. And this is a diagram of Tosafos' calculation that the inner square that's in a circle, the area is going to be half the space of the outer area. And that is more correct, but that would have a hard time explaining how that fits within the explanation of our Mishnah. Okay, so the Gemara is going to continue and say, okay, right now we spoke about a window between a courtyard. What about a window between two apartments? So inside a house, you have two apartments, and they want to make an eruv with each other. If they have a window, does that window have to be below 10 tefachim? Could it even be above 10 tefachim? And this is going to be based on the idea that we learned at the beginning of Masechta and the Gemara Shabbos as well, that under a roof, inside a space of a home, it's considered like solid space. And there is no 10 tefachim from the ground because everything is 10 tefachim from the ground because it's as if it's full. This is only in an outdoor window between two courtyards that it has to be within 10 tefachim of the ground. But if the window is between two houses, it could even be more than 10 tefachim from the ground, then it'll count. Nami, if they want to make an eruv, it counts. Echad, they can make a joint eruv. My timer, basically, because a house is as if it's full, so wherever you are, you're within 10 tefachim of the ground. So Rava asked Rav Nachman, what about if you are in an attic and you want to do so, or a window between the attic and the lower floor? So imagine now we have entryway to attics, basically a hole in the ceiling, a square rectangular hole in the ceiling. Does that also count? So Rav asked Rav Nachman, we learned, the teaching says, it is all one. The halacha of a window between two courtyards, or between two rooms, or between two attics, or between two roofs, or between two rooms. Or any window that you have is going to have the same rule. So it seems they would all have to be within 10 tefachim and 4 by 4. As it says, they all have to be kulan dalid al dalid b'techasar. They all have to be 4 by 4 within dalid al dalid, 4 tefachim, and by 4 tefachim and 10 on the ground. So he says, no, actually it doesn't have to be. What it means is, Terguma translate and explain that when it says that they all have the same rule, that's only talking about, this that it said that it has to be within 10 tefachim of the ground, that's talking about the courtyard. Achatzeros. So he says, wait, but you said echadli. He said that all the same. Iktani. Targuma adalat adalat. That's talking about the 4 by 4. It's sufficient for the 4 by 4 to be, all of them need a 4 by 4. But it does not need to be that it does not need to be 10 tefachim from the ground. They all have to be a 4 by 4 window to be valid as a connection, but not they don't have to be 10 tefachim from the ground. Now the Gemara says, okay, so Baimine Rabbi Abba bar Merav Nachman. Lul pasuach min habayis. If we have a window, an attic, essentially, the upper floor, the lower floor have an opening, but the opening is a hole in the ceiling of a hole in the floor of the upper floor, and a hole which is equals a ceiling hole in the lower floor. Does that count as a connection? After all, you said since there's a roof, it's as if the ground is solid all the way up to the roof, but it's not practical because you can't actually get there. So do you need a permanent ladder there or not? So the Gemara says, do we say the house is as if it's full and therefore there's no gap between the ceiling and the floor? Maybe that's only true if you have a window on the side. It's above 10 tefachim of the ground, but it is usable and functional. But if it's in the middle of the ceiling, that doesn't count. Or perhaps it made no difference. He said, indeed, you don't need a ladder there. So he thought, okay, you don't need a permanent ladder there. But but you do need a temporary ladder there for that Shabbos. Itmar, however, Amar Rav Yosef, Amar Yumi, Amar Rav Nachman, Echad Sulam Kavua, Echad Sulam Arai, in Etzarech, you don't need a permanent or a temporary ladder